Hello, testing. Hello, testing. All right. I just been made aware that the system hasn't been on. So I'm just going to do a quick recap and we can continue. So I was just saying that, the principal strategy of kingdom expansion is the influence of their culture on a foreign territory. And the strategy that they use is that they require the people who live on a foreign territory to change their thinking. Why? Once mentality changes, lifestyle will also change. So it also means that cultural practices will change, and that will reflect in the cultural outlook, cultural dimensions. So kingdoms influence their cultural, they influence territories through the expansion of their cultures. Now, I was just saying just a while ago that glory, the word glory, Glory, is actually the impact of cultural influence on territory. Now, and this simply means that whatever obtains in the kingdom must necessarily reflect on the territory that the kingdom expands into. So, and as I just said a moment ago, kingdom influence is executed through the influence of the thinking patterns of the residents of the foreign territory. So once they can enforce a rethinking, a change in the mentality of people who are in that foreign territory, then definitely they're going to influence their practices, which will have direct impact on the culture. And of course, what kingdoms will do is that they will send what we refer to as a colony into the territory. And the reason for sending that colony into that territory is so that uh, they can implement the execution of the cultural influence in that territory. So a colony is simply an outpost from a kingdom into another territory, into a territory that has been taken over. So what kingdoms will simply do is if kingdoms want to take over a territory, they of course do their various campaigns and then send a batch of people who are well versed in the culture of that territory. And their job, their remit, is to go in there and make sure that the people in the territory that's just been occupied also do exactly what those people do, so that their dressing, their language, their entire outlook reflects exactly what obtains in the kingdom. Now, that process is what we normally refer to as colonization. It's not necessarily bad, but that's exactly the way the kingdoms work. Of course, in the same way, God also his pattern is to establish the dominance of his culture on territories through the establishment of culture. So it would always demand a change in the thinking patterns of the people that he interacts with. So it's therefore not surprising that even Jesus, when he came in and was going to begin his mission, the first statement that came from his mouth was the word repent. The word repent is simply the word that means rethink. So kingdoms always demand rethinking of it from the people that they interact with. I mean, I'm talking about the territory that they go to take over. Why is that? That process of rethinking will ultimately lead to the establishment of a culture that looks exactly like the culture of the kingdom that takes over the territory. Now, why are we talking about this? We're looking at kingdom strategies for success. So, how does the thinking of the kingdom impact success especially the success of the citizens, or call it the subjects that they take over. Now, when kingdoms go into territory, normally they would look at what are the resources that are there, what are the kind of people that are there, what can they do, and they would require the use of the productive use of the resources in there, so that there can be profitability, they can make profit and replenish the reserves of the kingdom. Simple as that. So now it is the responsibility of the people who are tasked with working using those resources to ensure that there's profitability as well as productivity. Okay, so I'm going to use this concept to talk about exactly how God looks at each of us in terms of what our responsibilities are in the use of our resources. Now, there's something that one of the reasons why I thought about um, presenting this topic tonight is because I'm aware that we are definitely in the last quarter of 2015 now. I think that most people would take a look ahead, begin to take stock, to look at how the year has gone, and then begin to, peep into the next year to look at what needs to be done, where they are in their development, in their plans, in their strategic outlook. So that's why we're looking at this my hope is that all of us will have that sort of strategic outlook into the year that we go into. Of course, I'm aware also that some of us already do that, but is to promote that culture as a norm in this community, so that we have an intentional way of looking at the year that comes ahead. Okay, so that's really the objective of this, and the secondary objective is to see how we can help ourselves so that we can be more intentional in the goals, in the objectives that we have for the new year. Okay, so I'm going to talk very briefly about deployment, from a kingdom perspective, and how that leaders from, at every level, have that responsibility to actually not just get employed, but to actually deploy themselves in the areas of their dominant abilities. So I'm going to share the screen for a minute, for a few moments, and then talk about this section of the presentation. Now, I want to say that it's always man's responsibility to use the resources that he has in a productive way and to make profit. So productivity always has to be the priority goal in all of our minds when we look at the resources that have been placed at our disposal. As a matter of fact, in kingdom culture, we look at resources from the perspective of stewardship. So everyone is effectively a steward of the resources placed at his or her disposal. So the primary goal for placing those resources into our hands is so that we can actually become productive, multiply them, and actually bring profitable use as a result of engaging those resources. So now, if I wanted to just talk very briefly about one of the parables that we normally see when we look at scriptures, and that parable is the parable of talents. It's just, I would probably call it a parable of resourcefulness, maybe, because something is very apparent in that story, which is that the mode, or the process of becoming productive and profitable is entirely the responsibilities of those who are given those resources. So which means if we take stock and we look at ourselves, all that we have as resources. When I say resources now, I'm talking in a very broad sense: abilities, competencies, um, talents, including the the common one, which is financial um, resources. It is entirely our responsibility to become more productive in the use of them and to profit from those resources. So now, God Himself expects that everyone delivers quality return on his investment. I always look at God as somebody who is business minded, always looking to have returns on investment. Now, and I like to suggest that the returns on investment that is ever possible on our resources is entirely dependent on our leadership ability and our management abilities. What do I mean by leadership ability? I'm talking about the ability to take full responsibility and initiate the productive use of all of those resources. I call that leadership only because on this platform, there is a definition that we always advance, that leadership is not first and foremost over people. As a matter of fact, it has little or nothing to do about people. It is actually the the desire, the willingness to take responsibility for the productive use of our gifts, of our talent, of our resources. So, and of course, leadership for me will always go with management, because a leader may chart the course, but you still have to walk the course. So now it is management's responsibility to then decide how efficiency will be brought into the day-to-day use of those resources. So to that end, it looks to me that the ability to think strategically about the resources placed at our disposal, about what we have currently, is therefore a principal tool to be profitable and to be productive. So um, I'm going to, I want to suggest here that if we have maybe questions or contributions, or if thoughts are running to our mind, if we want to leave them on the chat panel, please do. And if we want to actually um, ask those questions or make those contributions, I will very much invite all of us to do so. So I want to talk along the same line of talking about deployment and strategic thinking. Um, Obviously, everyone thinks, including whether those thinking, those thoughts are productive or not. Absolutely, everyone thinks. Now, whatever we do with our thinking, um, or the outcomes of our thinking, always tell us what type of thinking they have been or they are. So, but I want to suggest that productive thinking focuses on research, on planning, on problem solving, and the use of abilities and available resources. This is just a quick summary of how um, how I look at productive thinking. The essence of productive thinking is in its focus. What does it focus on? Of course, productive thinking will naturally open pathways. Some people will say things like neural pathways. In other words, the mind will open various channels to look at the same issue from different perspectives. So, productive thinking will naturally open different pathways to look at the how resources, how abilities, how issues, how challenges can be solved or resolved. So, to that effect, I mean, productive thinking naturally would empower the individual. Productive thinking will naturally empower the individuals who are engaging in those. Now, I mean, when we talk about kingdom, I mean, I always like to say when I'm having conversations with friends that Kingdoms to me, I mean, maybe even to everybody, kingdoms are not religious bodies. Kingdoms are territories, they are nation states, and they are governments. In fact, my daughter, young daughter, defines kingdom in a particular way. She said that kingdom, said that a king means somebody who rules, and and dom represents um, dominion. So you're saying that a kingdom is it's when a king has dominion. And I thought, well, for a 7-year-old, that's not bad for thinking. So now, so kingdoms are not religious, are not religious bodies. They are nation states and they are governments. So to that effect, kingdom living is about having dominion, exercising productivity. But dominion itself is an outcome of a process. And that process is something that we want to really focus. In fact, that's the focus of tonight's presentation. So now, productive thinking, as I was saying, naturally empowers. Now, on the contrary, unproductive thinking, I mean, I'll just give one word for it, is worry. Worrying is an unproductive way to think because, again, because of its focus, the focus is on what isn't available, is on a state of insufficiency, a state of self-pity, a state of not wanting to take responsibility for things, always looking at somebody as being responsible for outcomes. And worry to me will normally go with confusion. If somebody is always worrying, the person is likely more often than not to always be in a state of confusion. So naturally, unproductive thinking or worrying for me, it always leads to disempowerment for anyone who engages in that. But of course, that's not what living kingdom culture is about. Now, I'm looking at kingdom culture in the sense of, if I look at most parables that Jesus used, he would talk in very practical terms, talking about, talents, using it, and accountability. Somebody coming, they give out the resources, coming back to say, okay, now let's settle this course. Let's look at the accounts. Now, that's very practical. That sounds like business to me. So that's why I'm talking about kingdom from that perspective of productivity and profitability. Now, of course, when we begin to talk about thinking, we cannot run away. We cannot depart too much from times and seasons. And when we're talking about times and seasons, we are actually looking at everything that we do is actually done in time. And I want to suggest that one of the reasons for times and seasons is the need to bring successes and disappointments to a closure and to have the opportunity to start again. What do I mean by that? I mean, no matter how successful we have been through the year, the year end, whether it's the physical year end or the calendar year end, allows us to take stock and actually have draw a line in the sand to say, okay, this is how far we have come through the year. And so it brings a kind of closure, a completion of a cycle within that time frame. Now, if on the other hand that one has had, disappointments, in the course of a period, whether it's a month period, whether it's a year, whether it's a quarter, that cycle again helps to put a closure to it. And I think that's why, all of us, really, most of us, would always have new hopes for the year. We always have new desires, new wishes, new aspirations, because we think that another cycle is starting. So, and to me, it looks like seasons and times must be approached with intent in order to make the most of the opportunities. I mean, we've got to be very intentional. Intentional is a word that's becoming very popular these days. And I think rightly so. To me, it looks like another word for being purposeful. So, you know, we've got to be intentional in order to make the most of the opportunities that come to us in the course of that year or the times that are allotted to us. Now, there is a particular tribe when I look through in scriptural times that are renowned. They actually been credited with good use of time and seasons, and it's a tribe called Issachar. One of the things that was said about them is that because they understand times, they know the opportunities that are in those times. So therefore, naturally, they know what to do, and they pretty much were leaders in their time. So all that we do when we look at time, investment of time in the search for knowledge and understanding, they will come as we invest that time in productive research. So it looks to me, therefore, that when we talk about research, it's actually a search for options, how we can approach things, how things can be done for the better, how we can actually bring about change that is productive, that can actually make things better. So knowledge and understanding are products of qualitative research. As a matter of fact, we only find what we seek. We only find whatever we're willing to pursue in search of. So, thinking about this, my mind really is very much with the friends, all of my you know trusted friends, loved ones who are always part of this community, this broadcast. And if there's anything in my mind, is so that it is that we all can step forward as a community and actually be more intentional in the coming year. Of course, we still have some time to go, and of course, my prayer is that everyone will be protected and kept safe. But we can look forward, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've seen many times in scripture when we say that if anybody wants to build a tower, it will first need to sit down. Now, building a tower happens over time, but there's still a requirement for planning. Okay, so that's why I think that it's always going to be productive if we look at this, if we pay more attention to this going forward. Now, one of the research, talking about research, one of the things I think is very productive in terms of research is to begin with a kind of search which begins with ourselves. Okay, so in other words, research yourself. That's this is a very strong suggestion, and I'm going to talk about this as quickly as possible. I made a note of this 2 weeks ago, but I felt like this should be put in a proper context, which is why we're bringing up again. Now, research. Now, I'm going to talk about this from 4 perspectives. Now, there are things that we are not aware of, and we don't know that we are not aware of them. In other words, they just don't cross our mind. They are not in our minds at all. It's a blind spot. So my question would be, as we begin to look inwards and set ourselves up for success, for greater productivity as a kingdom community, my first question would be, what is it that you do not know that you don't know? In other words, where is there any area where we are quite unaware? Now, that is often something that is hard to spot sometimes, because when something has not really come across the mind, I mean, how else would you know it? But the suggestion is that every man is ruled in the area where he or she is ignorant. When I say man now, that's a generic sense. In a generic sense, everyone is always ruled in the area of his or her ignorance. So what do we really need to be aware of, that we really need to know? And that's something that I want to highlight here. In the area where we absolutely don't know, don't are not aware of, I mean, well, we cannot be best. We cannot really do anything meaningful in those areas. So, uh, um, the suggestion here is to begin to look at and begin to really question ourselves about what is it that we really need to know. I mean, I want to suggest this, that it seems to me that we are typically educated out of ourselves. What do I mean by that? Right from childhood, we are always told about what to do, what not to do. I mean, by the time we get into the primary school, we are taught about what to learn. We are taught about things around us, people around us, you know, our history and all, I mean, histories around us. But I doubt if there's any time when they will say, sit down, let's educate you, let's find what is right inside of you. Maybe one of the reasons why that is not done is because it's probably not the business of anyone to do so. It looks to me that it is the responsibility of each person to know himself. The Greek philosophers of old, they couldn't find a better way to say it other than to say, "Oh man, know thyself." In other words, is to me is overdue to begin to move from unknown unknowns and make a progression away from there. Now, still on research, there's another area that I think we need to also explore, which is unconscious knowns. The things that we know, but we are not really conscious of. In other words, there are abilities that we have, but we are not really aware of them in a conscious sense. In fact, when somebody talks about us as having those abilities, we always we resort to self-doubt, self-cancellation. If somebody says to some people, I mean, in the kind of culture I grew up in, you know, if somebody says, "Oh, you're very, maybe you are a good runner," and you say, "So, why you ran that race very well?" You say, "Oh, it's not me." I mean, that kind of statement would naturally follow to say, "Well, it's not me," just in an attempt to sound humble. There's nothing wrong about having a measured explanation of oneself, but in the sense of how we can use our abilities for productivity, for betterment of not just ourselves but also our society. What are the things that we really, really need to consciously know? So now, I think, not consequently, when there are areas where we have unconscious knowledge, there's always a sense of inadequacy and dependence. Productivity will naturally be limited, and it will be absolutely impossible to deploy ourselves in those areas. In other words, if I don't know that I have the ability to help someone, I would always see myself as being inadequate to offer that help. So I'm talking in this context, not so much in the context of being arrogant. Now, this also reflects a bit in scripture where it was God himself now that was making a reference. It was saying that, look, I have made you gods, but you don't even know anything about it. So that's why everything is in chaos. That's why there's chaos all over the place, because you don't know what your status is. It's like somebody in the royal family who doesn't know he's a prince is going to live like a pauper. He's going to live like just any other citizen, whereas he's a king. I think the story is told about people who are traveling on a ship, and they lock themselves off in a cabin because they thought that they don't have money, and they denied themselves the benefit of enjoying all the things that was available on the ship, only because they did not know that they already have all their expenses paid on the trip. And so they live in denial. Understand that that's the context we're talking about here. Now, another area to quickly look at is the area of conscious unknowns. And we're talking about this in the context of that is I think it's time for us to be re-educated back into ourselves, to really become aware of what has been put in us in by God. Our natural gift, our divine endowment, the abilities that we have, including the competencies that we have acquired over time. So we're actually looking at what do you know you don't have. This is being aware of one's limitation. So I know I have learning needs. I know I need to develop in this area or that area. Now, my suggestion would be, why don't we make a plan to educate ourselves and explore learning opportunities to actually educate our strengths and to look for means for people who can supply what is lacking in us. Now, talking about the other one, both the unconscious or unknown unknowns and the unknown knowns, I have some suggestions, you know, and it is that I think that we have to be intentional about knowing ourselves to actually prioritize our learning experiences, which is that we don't allow an opportunity to learn to just go by without being utilized. Okay, now I have a few other suggestions which I will just bring up in a moment. And I also want to say that perhaps it's time to also look at what really are the things that we are truly interested in. What interests you? Now, the things that naturally interest us, to me, they reveal our natural inclinations, our natural tendencies. So, what is it that you are naturally interested in without external motivation, without external inducement? And my suggestion is this: why don't we take a notepad and write those down? Write them down as clearly, as detailed as possible. Another one would be, what are the challenges that we frequently face? What are the things that challenge us? Now, making a note of that, it looks to me like the challenges that life brings to us they are like callers. They call the hidden abilities in us that we may not yet be aware of. That's why sometimes most leaders are born out of challenges. When there's a challenge in the environment, when there is, maybe a crisis, and they step up to respond to meet those needs, most of the time leaders are born through that process, and they find out something in them that they never were aware of. So I would say challenges, to me, the challenges that especially we can look as far back in our time as possible, right from early childhood. What are the challenges that we face that we did not invite? It's a different thing. It's a different thing when we invite certain challenges on ourselves, and it becomes very difficult to go through them. But what are the challenges that came our way that we really did not invite? And how did we come through them? I think, one of my mentors said that it is not experience in itself is not the best teacher. He said, evaluated experience is the good teacher. So when we have experiences and we evaluate them, we begin to discover something that is already in us. This is different from learning from the experience of others, which is a very good thing. But the things that we have gone through, that life just brought our way, if we look at how we went through them, we can begin to make note of certain competencies that have been deposited in us that we never were aware of. So to me, that would be a suggestion as to how to address things that we don't even know that is there, or we have, but we're not really aware of. So back to the conscious unknowns. We already know areas where we know we have development needs or learning needs, and I think let's create a plan to actually strengthen the areas where we know we need to um, gain more help, better competencies. And in terms of staffing our strength, my suggestion would be we all in one way or the other have around us relationships that can help us to get to where we want to go. So why don't we staff our weaknesses and really take advantage of the people around us who can help us to get to where we need to get to? Okay. Now, another thing that I want to quickly talk about here is the conscious knowns, the things that we know and we know that we know them. So my question would be, what are your areas of competencies and skills? In which areas have you had the most success over the last 5 to 10 years? When you were in the secondary school, in the university, in primary school, what areas did you have the most successes in? In your first year, 2 years, 5 years of employment, what areas did you naturally excel in? So we can look at this, whether it's in the non-profit or profit environment. In other words, whether it's the volunteering environment. So what are the things where we just naturally excel? So these are conscious knowns. They are abilities that we know that we know. They are oftentimes the thing that we put on our CVs. And my suggestion would be to actually create a continuing education plan for them, to create a way by which we continue to develop them, and to also seek mentoring in those areas so that they can even get better, and then also consciously initiate a mentorship relationship with people who may need our help in those areas. Then another suggestion would be to actually differentiate and organize our expertise. What do I mean by that? Sometimes there are certain fields or there are certain areas that we go into, and those areas there are several options, but it may well be that there are areas where we differentiate ourselves, where we excel mostly than other areas. I would say perhaps it's time to actually differentiate. Differentiation is a strategy that is used in the market where service provider or product developers actually choose an area where they can excel more than all the competitors or anyone in their horizontal market or in their vertical market. So now, in the sense of organization is actually, for me, the first law of productivity. How do we organize those expertise, those skills to capture more value? So organization is what people actually call business. How do you turn your expertise into a business, something that other people actually come to you for, so that for you to serve them with? And of course, naturally, it creates a reward. So I would say, create avenues to serve your market with the assets that you already have. The assets being the competencies, the skills, the gifts. I mean, if I look at the young man Usain Bolt, all he learned to do was to run. I do not know anything about his degrees in the secondary school. I don't know if he had a BSc, if he has a master's. I don't know. And I really do not care, because all that we know about him is the productive use of his legs, of course, of his body frame. That's all we're celebrating for. So now, moving on, we want to also look at researching our market. So, of course, naturally, if we move on from the use of our gifts, of our competencies, our conscious area of knowledge, our known knowns, Then we want to then talk about how to actually engage the market. So, what the question I just want to throw out there is, what are your market needs and challenges? This calls for, which is why I use the word research. It is actually going after and researching the markets to be able to identify what needs they have and what challenges that they have. Are they being met already? Are they being met in the way that the market actually needs to have them? Are there things that are peculiar about our market? And the thing is this: every gift, every endowment that we have has a market for them, has a market that need them. So my suggestion would be that all of us, without anyone being left behind, can where we can channel our energies and resources and become like arrowheads and actually begin to plan for the coming year in the areas where in fact, even right from this year, and of course, God's grace will keep everyone to begin to look at how can I better serve my market? How can I spot the opportunities that exist through research? As a matter of fact, because we always find what we look for. If somebody is looking for at a market for the opportunities there, the person is likely to spot it more than somebody who is not even interested at all. So the other question would be, how does the market want to be served? How does the market want to be served? It's not every product that sells, and there's nothing worse than serving a product that nobody wants. So how does the market want to be served? And then, is the market already being served in those areas? Who is serving them already? Who do you know, and who do you need to know? And this is something that is becoming more and more important to me now. Sometimes some people can get arrogant and disregard other people and say, well, people don't really matter. Well, to me, people matter. And I think who you know matters. As a matter of fact, nothing comes to us except through relationships. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So there is who you need to know, and there is who you already know. And maybe it's time to actually evaluate all of those relationships and see which one is actually good for where we're going. So I would say a research at our market. So I will quickly talk about kingdom strategies, therefore, to being successful. Now, the first one I want to highlight is productivity. Productivity. I have a definition that I was looking at earlier today. I was just thinking, and I started to write it down. And this is something that we can develop further, or maybe we might even challenge if we want. But productivity, to me, looks like the creation of original concepts of ideas in the form of products or services. In other words, productivity is simply cultivating our endowments, gifts, talents, opportunities, skills, competencies into products or services that, expanding their use, expanding the application, and making them something that other people can interact with, something that other people can experience, something that other people can use. Other people, or including ourselves. When I say including ourselves, it means that it comes back to us in the form of rewards. So the first thing I would say is identification of our salient competencies, or call it skills, and the needs that the market has. The second one would be to actually, still in that line of talking about research, to actually search for the problems, the challenges, the needs, the wants, and the way that the market wants to be served. So this is just a natural follow-on from the previous slide. And then solution thinking. Solution thinking, to me, is the application of our resources, of our competencies, to actually meet the needs of the market, giving them productive or desired results, and actually going to give them options so that there are people who want Mazda, but they want Mazda 6. There's those who want Mazda 3. So those options are also some of the things that we need to think about. But we all, to me, need to move on in that sense to deliberately, the key word here is intentionality, to deliberately look at how to solve problems. So for me, it will start by saying, okay, how do I currently solve problems? And then go from there to say, how do I need to begin to solve this problem? Or how can I better solve these problems? What else can I do? And I'll quickly highlight the place of planning, which is that we are using our abilities and resources, including time, and I want to stress that, to solve problems effectively. So that is matching abilities, resources, principally time, and the rest of them, including finances, to solve problems effectively. Okay. Now, the second one I want to highlight very quickly is the factor of growth. The second strategy is deliberate attention to growth, which is the way I've coined that is creating production systems or service delivery systems. Now, one can go ahead and just create a product or a service, which is basically maybe a unit of product or a unit for a service. Now, that is, to me, very limiting. That is very, very limiting. Now, a way to expand growth is actually to create a system whereby more of that unit of product can be produced, or where that service can be served to more people. Again, it will have to do with identification and research to look at how to extend the use of that product. So if that product is only serving 10 people, how can it serve 20? If it's only serving one market, how can it serve such market in different locations or more horizontal markets? And the place of a team cannot be underrated, which is that, and I mean, one cannot multiply. There's only so much that one person can do by himself. But with a purposeful team, with a cohesive team, one can extend and expand a production even further. And of course, the active search of partnership and alliances is absolutely vital. And of course, marketing. Marketing is simply getting the product into the hand of more people. I'll keep it as simple as that. How can I get the product into the hand of more people? So these are things that I think that we need to pay more attention to as we begin to step and prepare for, the opportunities ahead. And then number 3, which will be the penultimate slide, will be business continuity. I want to call that business continuity, which is that we're saying, how do we manage our resources in a framework that allows them to continue to be available? In other words, it's almost as saying establishing a supply chain system. How can I make sure it is available when it is required and it is delivered when it is needed? Of course, but being able to set the goal or recast the vision is absolutely vital to this. If we know where we are going, we can better organize ourselves to get there. So, and this, of course, because at this point now, we're working with a team. It's about helping the team to constantly put the vision in front of them and to set the clear objectives and goals to go in that direction. And of course, the management system that is required. Of course, every organization will determine what is right for them, or every service, every market will dictate that most of the time. But there are standard practices, there are standard principles of management. And of course, establishing a continuous learning and innovation system where research can be continuous, where people can continue to learn. I also threw in there having a motivating reward system, because sometimes motivation, like one of our respondents asked last week, motivation is always a big problem. But one of the reasons why people are not motivated is that what they are doing is done for survival, is only done for sustenance. And when people do things for sustenance, they will need to constantly be motivated to keep on doing it. But when people do things because it calls into the significance inside of them, then they need little or no motivation at all. They will do it not for the reward, but not for the external reward, but for a reward that comes right from within. So naturally, when people can't see their future in a system, they will naturally be demotivated. So, but there are things that could be done. It may even be that certain people are not just the right fit for an organization, and they have to be helped to realign themselves into the place where they're best fit, where they fit into best. And of course, it's always good, I think, also as a rewarding, as a way of motivating a team to set a clear growth path for the team members so that they can see how they can grow in that business area or in that organization. And then finally, we're going to talk about the last one, which is expanding market influence, which is actually creating strategies to increase mind share. We hear more about market share, but I think market share actually begins with mind share, where the people who use our products or services already, they think about that product more than any other product in its category. So we already gotten a piece of their mind. Our product or our services already has captured a piece of their mind. So which means whenever they want that product or that service, we are the first on their minds. There are certain people that when they think about a car, the first thing that comes to their mind is maybe Mercedes-Benz. To some people, the first thing is BMW. To some people, it is efficiency, Toyota, and so on and so forth. Some people, when they think about maybe electronics, the first thing that comes to their mind is Samsung, only because Samsung has bought a mind share, a share of their mind. And of course, one of the ways to create a mind share is creating what I call virtuous cycles. These are like an area of competency, a niche area where we deliver most value and we can deliver it continuously and productively and profitably as well. And they've been put into a system that can reinvigorate itself. I call it a virtuous cycle. And of course, establishing a culture of excellence and service, which is that everybody expects that the best is the least to be delivered, or excellence is the minimum standard. And they have a culture of serving. So they're not in it for what they want to get, but they are actually in it for what they can give. But of course, in turn, the reward comes back to everyone that's engaged in the process. So in rounding up, I would want to say, as we begin to prepare ourselves for opportunities ahead, I want to suggest and also request that we begin to move towards being the principal influence in our market. At the end of the day, every product and every service or every individual who actually begins to serve his gift wants to get to a point where he or she is a principal influence in that market. I will put it in a different way shortly. It's also being the preferred service provider through excellent service delivery. And it is being the one who serves the most and serve the best. So that when is being somebody who serves the market the most, all the time, every time, more market, and serves them in the way that they love to be served, in the best way. I think is what Jesus framed very, very well when he said that I am not here to be served. I'm actually in your midst as the one who serves. Maybe little wonder why his name is still the dominant name, is the principal influence on all of our mouths and our minds. Jesus has brought sufficient mind share in all of our minds. That's why we talk about him all the time. Why? He served himself to the world the best and the most. So I think that everything that Jesus does is a strategy for every kingdom citizen, because he demonstrated the mind of God to the world. So when we see what he does, it is naturally a strategy for us. So I'm going to round up here, and I want to appreciate you for coming tonight. I don't know if there's any suggestion, anyone wanting to make a contribution. Of course, there are many other things that we can add to this, including interpersonal relationships, including there's a subtle reference to that, continuing to build a character. I didn't want to say more on that because Trista did an excellent job on that last week, but it cannot be overemphasized. It's something that we all have to keep on working at, and to have a cycle or a circle, an inner circle of accountability. People that we can say, hey, I'm in trouble in this area. I need somebody to straighten me up. I think I'm lacking in this area. And people who can naturally, who can call us to order when we are missing the mark. I think we all need that. And I want to look at this community as my own circle of accountability. I have to do right, not just for myself now, but also for this team, because I respect your commitment, always being around here to be part of this service. So I respect you and value you greatly, and I think I owe it to the team to do right, not just for myself, but for the sake of the entire team. I don't know if anybody has any question or any contribution, so that we can just take it very quickly and we can round up. If you can do that by either typing in the chat area, or even if just to type something there to say, just to know what your comments are, or if there's any of these areas that really caught your attention, or something that you can expand on one way or the other. You can request to speak by clicking on that request to speak button, or you can just type your contribution. We would absolutely love that. Okay. All right. If not, I would just want to thank everyone again for joining us tonight or this afternoon. I can see people join us from the UK, and I'm also aware that from UK and from the US. I always honor my dad for always being part of this. That's great encouragement, Dad. God bless you, sir. And my friend Ayo, and of course my family, my wife. Thank you all for joining. I'm aware that some people couldn't join us tonight. We would rectify any problem that you might have encountered tonight. We will also look at how we can serve on this platform better. And if you have any suggestion, please, you can always respond to the email through which you get this invite, and just let us know what we can do better, or if there's any way you can help us, we absolutely welcome it. So thank you very much for joining us again today, and God bless you. And let's begin to create a plan to be more influential, to serve better, and to gain influence through service in the coming year. God bless you, and bye for now.